I still remember that morning like it just happened. The sky was gray and the wind felt colder than usual. I stepped into our family bakery, expecting the smell of warm bread and the comfort of my daily routine. But instead, I found an envelope on the counter, resting right where my father used to leave his morning notes. My hand shook as I picked it up. As I read the words, my heart dropped into my stomach. Effective immediately, the bakery is under the ownership of Caroline Matthews. My sister. My own sister. I felt my knees weaken. I had trusted her. We had promised to keep this bakery together, to honor our father's memory. Tears filled my eyes, blurring the words on the paper. I sat down on my father's old stool, holding the letter like it was a knife that had just pierced my chest. My mind screamed, "Why would she do this?" The walls felt colder. The memories, once warm and alive, felt like shadows. That was the day my heart broke. Not just for the bakery, but for the family I thought I still had. As I sat alone in the empty bakery, my eyes drifted to the old cracks in the counter. Each one told a story. I ran my fingers along them, remembering my father's hand smoothing the dough, my mother's laughter as she wiped flour from my cheek, and Caroline, my sister, giggling beside me as we shaped our first loaves. I closed my eyes, and I swear I could still hear my father's voice. "Son, bread feeds the body, but love feeds the soul." A tear rolled down my face. I thought about Caroline, about how she used to believe in this place as much as I did. But somewhere along the way, she had changed. She started speaking of big plans, investors, expansion, things that never fit the spirit of our little bakery. I never imagined she'd take it from me. The pain in my chest was sharp, but even through my sorrow, something stirred. A quiet, small spark. I couldn't let this be the end. I stood up from the stool, wiped my eyes, and whispered to myself, "This bakery isn't dead. Not yet." My heart still ached, but deep inside, something stronger had begun to rise. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes of the past. My father's lessons, my mother's smile, the soft hum of the oven. They all played in my mind like an old song. But there was also Caroline's voice, sharp and cold, repeating in my head, "It's just business." No. To me, it was never just business. This bakery was our family's heartbeat. I thought about confronting her, barging into her shiny new office and demanding answers. But what good would that do? She had already played her move. She held the power. I needed to do something she wouldn't expect. Slowly, a quiet plan began to form in my mind. I wouldn't fight her with anger or threats. No. I would rebuild not just the bakery, but the spirit of it. I would gather the town, remind them why they loved this place. I would fill these empty walls with warmth once again. As dawn broke, casting a soft light over the counter, I felt a deep calm. If she thought she had ended me, she was wrong. This was just the beginning. The morning light crept through the bakery windows, touching the old wooden counter. I stood there, staring at the empty shelves. They looked so lonely without the fresh bread and cakes that once filled them. It hurt. Every corner of this place carried my family's memories. My father's laughter, my mother's gentle voice, and even Caroline's bright eyes as she sprinkled sugar on warm buns when we were just children. Now, all of it felt like it was fading away. I walked slowly to my father's old chair, the one he used to sit in after long days of work. As I sank into it, I felt a deep, aching sadness. I closed my eyes and whispered, "What would you do, Dad?" Silence answered me, heavy and cold. But in that silence, something small sparked inside me. A flicker of courage, maybe. Or perhaps just stubborn hope. I opened my eyes and looked around. "I can't let her take everything," I said out loud, my voice firmer. "I won't." That was the moment I decided. I would not surrender. No matter how broken I felt, I would find a way to bring life back to this place. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. As I was sweeping the floor, the door creaked open. I turned quickly, my heart racing. For a moment, I hoped it was Carolyn, coming back to make things right. But it wasn't. It was Mrs. Donnelly, our oldest customer. She walked slowly, her cane tapping softly on the floor. "Thomas," she said, her voice warm but weak. "I heard about what happened. I thought you might need these." She held out a small bag of flour and a jar of honey. My throat tightened as I took them from her trembling hands. "Thank you," I managed to say, though my voice cracked. She gave me a gentle smile. "Your father's bread kept my family fed during hard times. I haven't forgotten." Her words filled my chest with something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. As she left, I placed the flour and honey on the counter. They were small gifts, but to me they felt like treasures. Maybe, just maybe, the town hadn't given up on me. Maybe, if I fought hard enough, I could save not just the bakery, but my family's story. I felt the first tear fall, but this time, it was not from sadness. That night I lit the old oven. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the dark bakery. I watched the flames dance, and I thought about every early morning I had spent here side by side with my father. His voice echoed in my memory. "When you feel lost, Thomas, light the fire. Start again." With Mrs. Donnelly's flour, I began to knead the dough. My hands moved slowly at first, stiff from days of sadness. But soon, they found their rhythm, like they always had. As I worked, I felt a strange peace settling over me. The bakery wasn't dead, not yet. I shaped the dough with care and placed it into the oven. The familiar smell of baking bread filled the air, wrapping around me like a warm blanket. For the first time since Caroline's betrayal, I felt alive. I wiped my hands on my apron and looked out the window into the quiet street. Tomorrow, I decided, I would bake for anyone who still remembered us. I would gather the broken pieces of this bakery and my heart and build something new. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window. For a moment, I thought about staying in bed, letting the storm outside match the one in my heart. But I couldn't. Not after lighting the oven last night. Not after feeling that small spark of hope. I pulled on my coat and walked to the bakery. My shoes splashed in the puddles, and my breath formed little clouds in the cold air. As I opened the bakery door, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. There, on the counter, was a small cloth bag. Inside it were 2 sticks of cinnamon and a note that read, "For your cinnamon rolls. We miss them." No name, no signature. Just simple words that felt like a warm hug. My throat tightened. Someone still cared. Someone remembered. I held the cinnamon close to my chest, tears filling my eyes. Even in the middle of this storm, someone believed in me. Someone believed in our bakery. Right then, I knew I had to keep going. No matter how hard the rain fell, I had to bake again. Not just for me, but for all of them. The smell of cinnamon filled the bakery. As I pulled the tray of warm rolls from the oven, I looked toward the window, and my heart almost stopped. There were faces there. Old Mr. Carter from the hardware store. Mrs. Donnelly again, holding her cane tightly. Even little Emma from the school across the street, her nose pressed against the glass. They were watching me, waiting. My hands shook as I placed the rolls on the counter. I unlocked the door slowly, not sure what would happen. But as soon as I opened it, they stepped inside. Their eyes filled with warmth, sadness, and something else. Hope. "Thomas," Mr. Carter said softly, "you're still here." "I never left," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Mrs. Donnelly reached for a roll, her hands trembling. "It still smells like home," she whispered, tears in her eyes. My heart swelled. They hadn't come just for the bread. They had come for the memories, the love, the family that this bakery had always been. I served each one of them with care, my eyes burning with tears. For the first time in weeks, the the bakery felt alive again. And so did I. That evening, just as I was cleaning the counter, I saw a shadow outside the window. I froze. It was Caroline. She stood across the street, her arms crossed, watching the bakery with a hard, unreadable expression. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to rush outside, to shout at her, to ask her why she had done this to me, to us. But I held back. Instead, I kept wiping the counter, my hands steady. She didn't come inside. She just stood there, staring at the faces of our old customers, at the warmth that had returned to the bakery. For a moment, her eyes softened. I saw something. A crack in her cold mask. Was it regret? Was it pain? Before I could find out, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening mist. I stood there, staring at the empty street, my heart heavy. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. I would not give up. No matter how many times the past tried to pull me back into the shadows, I would keep moving forward. Because this bakery wasn't just my fight, it was my home. The bakery was quiet after sunset. I sat alone by the old recipe book, running my fingers over the faded pages. The edges were worn, the ink smudged by years of flour-dusted hands. I flipped to one page that had always meant the most to me, my father's secret family recipe. "Grandfather's honey loaf," I read aloud. As a boy, I had watched my father bake it for special occasions. He always said, "This bread brings people together." A tear slipped down my cheek. I had forgotten about this recipe and all the pain and chaos. Maybe Caroline had forgotten too. I wiped my eyes and began gathering the ingredients. Flour from Mr. Carter, honey from Mrs. Donnelly. My heart swelled with gratitude. This wasn't just baking, this was rebuilding. As I kneaded the dough, I felt like my father was there with me, guiding my hands. The smell of honey and warmth filled the room, wrapping around me like a hug from the past. I placed the loaf in the oven and whispered, "This one's for you, Dad." Outside, I saw a small crowd gathering at the window. Hope was rising, just like my dough. The next morning, the sun peeked through the clouds as I pulled the golden loaf from the oven. It looked perfect, just like I remembered from my childhood. I carefully sliced it, feeling the soft warmth inside, and placed the pieces on a tray. I opened the door and stepped outside. People were waiting, more than before. Some held empty baskets. Others just stood quietly, watching me with hopeful eyes. Without saying a word, I offered the first slice to Mrs. Donnelly. Her hands trembled as she took it. She bit into the bread, and tears rolled down her cheeks. "It tastes like home," she whispered. One by one, the neighbors came forward. I didn't charge them. I couldn't. This bread wasn't about money. It was about love. It was about reminding them, and myself, of what we had lost and what we could still save. As the last piece was taken, I looked across the street. Caroline was there again. But this time, she wasn't cold. She held something in her hand, a crumpled old family photo. Our family, smiling in front of the bakery. Our eyes met. And for the first time, I saw something real in her gaze. Sorrow. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Caroline had looked at me. Her eyes weren't full of power or pride anymore. They were full of something deeper, something heavy. I sat by the window staring at the photo she had carried. I remembered the day we took it. My father had his arms around both of us, his smile brighter than the sun. "Together," he had said, "this family can build anything." I wondered if Caroline remembered those words. As I thought about it, I heard the bell over the bakery door. My heart jumped. For a second, I hoped it was her, but it was Mr. Carter, carrying a small wooden box. "I kept this for you," he said softly. "Your father gave it to me for safekeeping." Inside, I found my father's old apron, neatly folded. I held it to my chest, tears burning my eyes. "I believe in you, Thomas," Mr. Carter added before leaving. I tied the apron around my waist, feeling a warmth spread through me. I stood tall behind the counter. This fight wasn't over. Not for the bakery, not for my family, and not for Caroline. That evening, as I wiped the counter, I heard a soft knock at the bakery door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, I walked over and opened it. There she was, Caroline. She stood there, holding the old family photo against her chest like it was a shield. Her eyes were red, and her lips trembled as if words were trapped inside her. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I wanted to speak, but my throat felt tight. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Do you remember this day?" I looked at the photo. Of course I remembered. It was the day our father said we were his pride, the day he told us the bakery would one day be ours to share. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I lost my way," she admitted. "I thought power and success mattered more than family." Her words broke something inside me, but they also lit a small, flickering light of hope. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. Without a word, she walked in. Maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. We sat at the old wooden table, the one my father had built with his own hands. The bakery smelled of honey and cinnamon, just like it did in the old days. Caroline looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously in her lap. I could see the weight she carried. Regret had carved deep lines into her face. "I thought if I made the business bigger," she began softly, "I'd make Dad proud." Her voice cracked, and her eyes filled again with tears. "But I see now," she continued, "bigger isn't always better." I felt my own eyes sting. She wasn't the same cold sister who took everything from me. She was my sister, lost, broken, and searching for forgiveness. "I never wanted to fight you," I told her, my voice shaking. "I just wanted us to build this place together like we promised." She reached across the table, her hand trembling, and placed it over mine. "I miss our family," she whispered. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart swelled with emotions too big to hold back. So I just nodded, squeezing her hand gently. There, at that table, we found something more precious than success. We found each other. The next morning, I woke with a strange feeling in my chest. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't heavy with pain. It felt lighter, warmer, like hope had finally taken root. I went to the bakery early. The sky outside was soft and golden, the first sunlight of a new day peeking over the rooftops. To my surprise, Caroline was already there. She stood by the window, looking out at the empty street. When she saw me, she offered a small, unsure smile. "I thought I'd help today," she said, her voice soft. I nodded, my heart full. We worked side by side, like we used to when we were younger. She dusted the counter while I prepared the dough. We didn't need to say much. Our actions spoke louder than words. As the first loaves baked, the smell drifted through the town. Slowly, people began to gather outside, drawn by the familiar warmth. Caroline glanced at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "They came back," she whispered. "They never left," I replied softly. "They were just waiting for us to come home." That morning, the bakery wasn't just a building. It was a family reborn. That morning felt different. As I stepped into the bakery, I saw Caroline already there, kneading dough. Her eyes were red, but not from anger, from tears she could no longer hide. We didn't speak at first. We didn't have to. The townspeople began to arrive, not just to buy bread, but to offer small gifts: fresh eggs, jars of honey, bags of flour. One by one, they placed them on the counter with soft smiles and warm words. "This is for the family that fed us all these years," said old Mrs. Donnelly, her hands trembling as she wiped her eyes. My chest tightened, and tears blurred my vision. Caroline looked at me, her lip quivering. "I thought I had lost everything," she whispered. "You never lost me," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. You just forgot where home is. Right then, she broke down. She covered her face and cried like the little sister I once knew. I stepped closer and held her in my arms. The bakery filled with the scent of fresh bread and the sound of healing hearts. This wasn't just our bakery anymore. It was a symbol of forgiveness. Word spread like wildfire. The whole town gathered for what they called our grand reopening. But to me, it felt like the opening of our hearts, not just the bakery. Caroline and I stood at the door, side by side, just like we had when we were children helping Father open for the morning rush. She squeezed my hand and I felt her fingers tremble. Together, we pushed open the door. The crowd cheered. Some clapped, some wiped their eyes, and some simply smiled through their tears. We served bread to every single person, but it wasn't about the loaves or pastries anymore. It was about the love baked into every bite. It was about the memories of our father and the family we had almost lost. "Thank you," Caroline whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "for believing in me, even when I stopped believing in myself." I looked around at the full bakery, the happy faces, and the warmth that filled the air. "This is what he would have wanted," I said softly. And I knew in my heart that my father was watching us, proud beyond words. We had rebuilt not just a business, but a family. That evening, as the last customer left, Caroline and I stood in the quiet bakery, surrounded by empty baskets and full hearts. She picked up the old family photo from the counter, her fingers tracing our father's smiling face. "We found our way back," she said, her eyes shining with tears. I smiled and nodded. "We did," I replied softly. Then, together, we took out the recipe book. The pages were worn, just like our journey. We added a new page at the back titled, "The Recipe for Forever." Underneath, we wrote, "Ingredients: forgiveness, love, family, and community. Bake daily. Share with the world." We placed the book back on the shelf where it belonged. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the bakery. As I locked the door for the night, I felt at peace. Not because we had saved the bakery, but because we had saved each other. Our father's dream lived on, not in flour and ovens, but in the love we shared. And I knew, deep in my heart, that this was only the beginning. Dear friends, if this story touched your heart, if you felt the pain, the tears, and the healing of family, please leave a comment below. Share your feelings with us. I read every single one. If this journey made you cry, even just a little, give this video a like so we can spread more stories of hope and love. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories that bring us closer, story by story. Your love and support are the true ingredients that keep this family alive. Let's bake more memories together. I'll see you in the next story.